bipartisan group of U.S. senators has just returned from a trip to Israel where they also met with Prime Minister Netanyahu and his war cabinet. I spoke to one of the senators on that trip, Republican Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. Senator, thank you so much for joining us on BBC News tonight. You have just returned with a bipartisan delegation from a visit to Israel. Can you tell us what you witnessed, what you learned there?
Well, we met with both the Prime Minister Netanyahu and his war cabinet. We met with, in a separate meeting, with General Gallant, a separate meeting with President Herzog, and then with a separate meeting with Benny Gantz, and then lastly, with family members, American Israelis with family members who have been taken hostage. From all of them, a sense of grief, a sense of shock, of disappointment that people were not kept safe. Now, for the political and the military leaders, there was a resoluteness that they were going to address this. They were going to secure the border with Gaza Strip. They were going to protect against any incursions by Hezbollah. From the family members, they were kind of unfortunately buffeted by events. And there was an incredible sense of tragedy, but they still were hopeful. I'll just say this, Sumi. One woman said, it's hard to imagine that good news is that you hear that although your son has lost an arm and he's being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza, the good news is that he's alive. And I think that kind of summarizes the pathos of the situation.
Senator, we just saw the president having a rare wartime visit to Israel, where he reaffirmed the U.S.'s support for Israel, and he also called for aid to get to civilians in Gaza. What do you think of the message that he delivered on his trip? And he's also going to be speaking to the nation about the war on Thursday evening.
Well, the message is that the United States stands with Israel, and we stand against terrorism. And there's no one better to convey that message than the president. We did it as 5 senators. And he did it again as president. By the way, going back to the families who have family members taken hostage, one of them expressing incredible disappointment that their government had not kept them safe, but said that they were looking to the United States to kind of be that big brother who was going to support them, even if they felt as if their own government had not done its job. Now, I'm just almost directly quoting what they said. So when the president goes there and expresses his support, I can imagine the emotional impact that has upon many who have been so terribly emotionally assaulted.
There has been criticism, Senator, of the U.S.'s role in not pushing enough on behalf of the citizens in Gaza at the moment. And President Biden did work with Egyptian President al-Sisi to allow 20 aid trucks into Gaza. Egypt now says there is going to be a sustainable aid corridor. Our correspondents say that aid is going to be of little help because the hospitals need fuel right now. Should the U.S. be doing more to support civilians in Gaza?
We have to recognize that there's a limit to what the United States or anyone can do. It requires the cooperation of the Egyptians, the Israelis, and Hamas. And so we can propose, but others have to permit. And if we think that we, the United States, can go in there and just dictate in a chaotic situation, people have the wrong perception. I will point out, by the way, let me just say as an aside, in our meetings with the Israelis, they were all asking that the United States help make sure that humanitarian aid gets into Gaza. They were asking for that, which I think says something for the Israelis. They are differentiating Hamas from the Palestinians, from the Palestinian people.
Okay.
But as far as the U.S. role is, we should push for whatever we can do to bring humanitarian aid in, understanding that Israel is going to have security concerns about some of what that aid might be.
Senator, we have spoken to multiple experts who have said that the Israeli aim here to eradicate Hamas from Gaza is going to be militarily difficult, politically perhaps not possible. Since you met with the Prime Minister and the War Cabinet, as you said, what did they share about what Israel's plan might be going forward, particularly for Gaza?
Well, the only person I asked permission to quote was Benny Gantz, and he said I could quote him. But they all said about the same thing. But Gantz said at the end of this, there may be some guy wandering around with an AK-47, but that their military leadership and their operational leadership will be crushed. And so if you view Hamas as an ideology, yes, the ideology will persist. Wipe out Israel, kill all the Jews. But if you want to view it as an operational and military organization, it's Israel's intent to crush it. Whether they can, we shall see, but they are certainly resolved to do so.
There were large protests at the Capitol today, including a Jewish group calling for the end of Israeli bombing of Gaza and advocating for a ceasefire. Senator, what is your message to those protesters?
Well, we have to put that in perspective. When 3,000 Americans were killed on 9/11, if someone had said to the Americans, to us, don't go after Osama bin Laden, don't go to Afghanistan, which is housing the fellow, we would have said, you got to be kidding me. They killed 3,000 Americans. Now, if you just take the small population of Israel, and they lost 1,300, and you extrapolate it up to the 330 million of the United States with the same proportion of civilians, it would be 30 to 40,000 Americans killed. Now, looking at what happened at 9/11, 3,000 died. We were going to go after those people that did it. Imagine if 35,000 had died. I think you have to recognize that from the Israeli viewpoint, this was an unforgivable assault upon their people, and they cannot have safety for their people wherever their people live as long as Hamas is committed to killing all the Jews. Now, you have that perspective. You have their perspective, you can understand why they're conducting this operation.
All right, Senator, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on BBC News Tonight.
Thank you, Sumi.